The situation that now faces the ICC, the International Criminal Court, given Vladimir Putin's arrival and ceremonial reception in Mongolia, highlights the limitations of international legal institutions like the ICC in enforcing its various mandates. The photographs of President Putin arriving in Mongolia, it reminds me a little bit of a sort of fairground. It looks spectacular. But despite Mongolia being a signatory to the Rome Statute, the ICC lacks the capability to enforce sanctions or to expel member states that fail to comply, such as Mongolia's refusal to arrest Putin, who is wanted for war crimes, and war crimes specifically for his treatment of children. It's a little bit like the child catcher in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, or the the children being taken in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Mr. Putin is the child catcher. Mr. Putin is the baddie. Mr. Putin is the evil incarnate. Whether he's alive or dead doesn't matter. And one of the ICC's key challenges lies in its reliance on voluntary cooperation from its member states. And without its own enforcement mechanism or police force, the ICC depends on states to execute arrest warrants like that for Putin. Mongolia, however, is in a precarious position, heavily dependent on Russian energy and bordering two major powers, Russia and China. And this places the country in a delicate diplomatic position where political expediency outweighs any sort of legal obligations. And while Mongolia's reception of Putin is an international blow to the ICC, it doesn't face direct punitive consequences beyond potential diplomatic censure or reputational damage. Expulsion from the ICC is not stipulated in the Rome Statute, and previous instances, such as South Africa's failure to arrest Sudan's Omar al-Bashir, have shown that non-cooperation doesn't result in severe consequences. This creates a broader question for international justice. Can the ICC remain credible if it cannot enforce its own rulings? In this case, Mongolia's actions are a short-term political victory for Putin, symbolizing the broader challenge faced by international institutions when national interests supersede global justice. But this episode also underscores the importance of diplomatic pressure and the international community's response to maintain the ICC's relevance. Should member states perceive no serious repercussions for ignoring their obligations under the Rome Statute, the credibility of international justice itself as a whole is eroded. In the end, Mongolia's decision may serve as a temporary victory for Putin and the Kremlin, but it also reveals the fragility of international law when it lacks the power to enforce what it wants beyond the moral and reputational pressure that might be produced. Gleb Bogush, for example, believes that the Kremlin can view Mongolia's refusal to arrest Putin as a success. He says this confirms the worldview of Russian authorities, in which both international and national law are meaningless. And there's a human rights advocate, Stanislav Dmitrievsky, who also considers Mongolia's stance a temporary victory for Putin. And I think that's that's appropriate, and also the link with 2015 when South Africa failed to arrest al-Bashir, and 2 years later the ICC, when it found that the country hadn't fulfilled its obligations, didn't bring the matter to the assembly. Nothing happened. So has Mongolia actually violated the law and defied the provisions of the Rome Statute? And And Gleb Bogusz is very clear. The crimes Putin is accused of are serious conventions of the serious violations of the Geneva Conventions, and states that have ratified the conventions are obliged to prosecute or extradite those who breach the principles. But because there will be no consequence, there isn't there isn't a convincing legal obligation, or there's not a convincing legal position. So it's a sort of nonsense situation.